Live. Hello and welcome. So this is a huge day for Decred. Not just because we turned 10 years old, but it's also the day that we completed our 13th upgrade. Consensus upgrade finished a few hours ago. It's absolutely great. So well done to the team on that one. But we are also 10, which is incredible. What a journey. It's been massive, and we're lucky today to be joined by Dave Collins and Jake, who were there right at the beginning to kind of delve into some of this stuff and hopes for the future. But before we crack into that, how is everyone? How you doing, Dave? How you doing, Jake? How you doing, Exodus?
Oh, I'm doing great, thanks.
Doing good here.
Yep, all good here.
Good stuff. No, we were saying before the show started, and I feel humbly privileged that I'm part of this Decred journey. I mean, I was not here at the beginning. I was 3 or 4 years in when I actually found out about Decred, and I kind of just, I mean, I'm a classic researcher because I come from an educational background. Classical kind of like getting into the research, finding out what this stuff does, trying it out, and then when all of a sudden it went, oh my god, this is actually something really special. And I just felt that getting at that stage was incredible, and still to be here now, and I mean to watch all the improvements that have happened, and to look at where we're going is absolutely brilliant. I mean, just to kind of go, and I don't mind who wants to start. Maybe we'll kind of go Dave and then Jake, or vice versa, whichever who wants to take the question first. But what would you consider Decred's biggest achievement from the last decade? I mean, you guys have obviously been involved in everything. So, what would you consider the one or maybe two things that have made it stand out and been awesome? Oh, Dave, you're muted, buddy.
There's quite a few technical things. I would say probably from a more normal perspective or normal person perspective, has to be the governance. Obviously, that's probably the big selling point, if you will. In fact, I think it's quite interesting now that after all this time, I think more people are finally starting to see some of those governance issues manifest in other projects that are high profile. So yeah, I would, without a doubt, I think that's probably the biggest thing.
Yeah, I got to agree with Dave here, which is I think that, sort of the vision that started it all was Bitcoin is great, but there's a lot of things that probably need to change over time and, or aren't set up or need to be added. And when you get into the nitty gritty of it, upgrading consensus rules is no joke. I mean, people literally fight for years over this, and then it's all very centrally planned. And so, and then, in some of these, DAOs that are like tokens, you'll see disputes between, say, the VC backers who hold most of the asset, and then the developers. And it's like, I feel like you need to try to run the middle course, because if you split these two groups up, everybody's fighting, and there's not a lot, everybody's fighting at the bus stop. So I feel like that's really sort of like how we got to where we are, is by having the sort of the infrastructure so that we don't fight at the bus stop. And it's just like you said, it's timely, right? With all this like Epstein and sort of, pedo adjacent VC stuff. It's all very, the governance structures of Bitcoin are looking as questionable as ever. And so it's kind of funny that, we're here for the 10-year anniversary, and it's like, and there was a lot of pedo involvement in Bitcoin, apparently.
I mean, it's so relevant with all. I haven't delved into all of the Epstein files, but it really doesn't surprise me to know that the shady backers that were there in the beginning is incredible. I mean, what do you guys make of all that stuff? Just a brief sort of thing, rather than going down that rabbit hole. But what do you guys make of that? It's just craziness, right?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't really matter if we're talking about a specific mechanism or method, but I think it really just goes to showcase the real problem is that whenever you have any kind of a centralized governance structure in any project, whether it's a consensus, or I'm sorry, a committee, governance by committee, or governance by core devs, or governance by basically any small number or group of people, it's fairly easy in the grand scheme of things to corrupt those people. There's all kinds of ways you can go about it, whether it's the type of stuff that you see in the Epstein files, or just straight up money, paying people. They're really, it's I think it's pretty clear when people start to see that it's really not a good idea to have a small number of people, and that's why I think that Decred's model is so much better in that regard. Is that stakeholders are all for the most part, and especially ones that want to be completely anonymous. I mean, how do you go and corrupt people that you don't even know who they are? And they're the ones making the decisions. So, yeah.
And I feel like, that's it. The problem, right, is this delegation of sovereignty. It's present in so many places in our society. People just don't really look for it, right? Most people don't think when I'm at a bank, I'm delegating my sovereignty over these assets to the bank, right? You deposit your money at the bank, then the bank can basically go to the casino with your money. And people don't think about that. It's very unconscious because people have literally been trained, their whole, young adult lives to not be aware of these kinds of problems. So, it's not horribly surprising to me that, these problems kind of persist, but it's fascinating that they're so on display right now. That is to see, like, there's a small cabal of people who are, very rich and very powerful. And these, there's huge incentives to compromise these people, whether it's through, underage girls and videos of people doing things they shouldn't be doing, or just like Dave pointed out, bribery. Whenever there's a small group of people who have had like a lot of sovereignty delegated to them, there's a massive incentive to compromise these people. And I feel like, what we do with Decred is, and this is probably part of why we've had a lot of trouble with things like exchange listings and VC investors. Like nobody was really interested in our project from a VC investor, perspective, because we build direct sovereignty systems. That is, systems that don't allow you to rig crap so that, this tiny group of people can run the whole thing without there being, strong incentive alignment. So it's not like, somebody can finagle the board seats and then now everything is run by these handful of people who have the board seats, but the board seats are held by institutional investors. And then, they're a cutout for the people who invested in their institution. Right. So it's like, I feel like the fact that we didn't do these things and all these things that we did that obviously we think are positive is part of why people were like, I think I'll pass because I can't rig it.
Excuse me, where's my free money? I mean, so the one that keeps coming out over here about the Epstein file is Sir Mandelson, soon not to be, of course, but and the way that he was just feeding front runner information so that they could trade on it. And it's like, dude, you should be in jail. It's like, it's not even funny, but you're completely right. This whole idea that society, you have to say, okay, well, I trust this person, so they can make my decisions for me because I can't be trusted to make that decision. We're past that. I really feel that, and I think that's why I like Decred so much, because it's as actual fact. If we're going to spend this money, I at least want to have a say in it. If I've invested all this money, I want to say in it. I don't want you to have my say, and no matter how small it is, I want to have it. I want to have that say, and I love that theory behind it. Whether it comes to spending, whether it comes to upgrading the consensus, whether it even just comes down to having a discussion on a proposal or whatever, just to have that say is incredible. I mean, I'm not sure how it works over there, but we have local boards over here, and if you're lucky, you can pop your head in the door, but you're never really allowed to say anything. So the fact that you hold some money and that gives you the right to say something is leaps and bounds what we've currently got. I mean, the next question I had is, have you been surprised at any of the voting or how stakeholders have voted over the last 10 years?
Probably on a couple of proposals that passed that I thought were questionable, and vice versa. But yeah, I'd have to actually go back and look to really identify a specific one. But it has definitely happened more than once where a surprising outcome happened. It's like, oh, okay, well, that's how it goes. That's part of being part of the system. So yeah. In fact, I remember one that I wanted to pass quite a bit and it didn't. So, but it's just how it is.
Something that did surprise me about the whole voting system on proposals was the tepid participation earlier on. That is, once we only started having proposals to vote on, I think in like 2018 is my recollection. And once we did, one thing I couldn't help but notice was it was only 25%, maybe 30% of the stake would vote. And I found that very odd. I was like, why is only, given the sort of the very much self-custody, centered narrative that our project has, I found it very surprising that, we end up, why are only 25 or 30% of the, the stakeholders voting? Well, and I think what we came to sort of discover is that there was a certain someone who had a lot of coins, and they didn't want to vote because I think they didn't want us to they didn't want to rock the boat and potentially tip us off as to their presence.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, yeah, we now have. I mean, the power of doing things peer to peer, the power of doing things non-custodial, and actual fact, even things like DCR Dex, Bison Wallet, where you start to see these patterns emerge. Where on something like Binance or Coinbase, you can literally, you're seeing hundreds of thousands of coins move backwards and forwards daily, and there's no real pattern for ownership. Whereas the minute that DCR Dex came out, it was like, oh, there's a strange pattern happening here. And I know you guys were a lot more up on that than I ever was, but that's part of the incredible nature of the project as well. And you're not wrong. I mean, if you're owning a lot of coins and not voting, it does seem strange. I mean, the other thing I might say is maybe it was a bit harder than it took me a good 6 months to a year to kind of get enough coins and then work out how to do it safely. So. And I mean, now, of course, it's so easy and everything's so stable and brilliant. Exus, what do you think about all this?
Yeah, totally agree with everything. Interesting release, interesting timing of the release of those files with Decred's birthday. And then we had that consensus change that went live about 2 hours ago. And that consensus change had to do with the Decred treasury and raising the spending limits. And the treasury is what makes us so sovereign. The self-funding treasury, we don't have to go to outside capital and allow them to capture the protocol. And I think that's such a genius thing Decred did. And I'm really surprised more projects don't do that. It makes so much sense to just say, okay, a portion of the block reward is going to this treasury, and that treasury is going to make the project autonomous and self-sovereign. And then as far as the voting goes, one thing I've seen over the years is it used to be Politeia proposals would get a lot of comments. And I feel like the comments have shifted to either matrix or private discussions, to where I'm not sure why, but people don't like commenting on Politeia. This is something I've kind of seen. And maybe it's because the comment on Politeia is permanent. It's timestamped to the blockchain. It's there forever. Whereas, you might have some offhanded comments, but the comments, the discussions that, something like matrix element are quite good. And I would kind of like to see more people use the platform itself to comment. I don't know if that's just something I've seen over the years. I don't know if you guys agree with that. But yeah, definitely interesting time and release of those files, the discussion of sovereignty, and then we have that consensus change, which lands literally on Decred's 10th birthday, which is awesome.
Was that time, Dave?
Oh, I was just pre-plan it now. Just the way it worked out, it was pretty cool. But speaking of that, when you said that, it kind of made me laugh because I mean I knew it was soon, but I actually didn't even know it had gone live quite yet when I woke up. So it just goes to show you, it's the system's pretty nice in that regard. Is that once it gets started and everything is out there, it either activates or it doesn't, depending on whatever the stakeholders vote, and it doesn't take any other input or anybody sitting there monitoring or anything like that. It just does its thing.
Yeah, I hope the exchange is certainly. I hope the exchange is upgraded. I know Binance was upgraded, so that's the big one. They were all set, but it's crazy to have this hard fork and like nothing changes because both the stakers and the miners are already upgraded. So it's the seamless transition to those new rules.
Yeah, I mean, I love our upgrade system. It's the no nonsense. I mean, I feel like something that that's kind of a funny, like the not so silver lining, like the downside to having smooth upgrades on consensus is that it's not something, it doesn't turn into the Real Housewives of Bitcoin, right? Like it does for Bitcoin. It's the same thing with the halvening, right? There's not this like, oh, look at here comes this event, right? So I feel like the sort of the intentional drama component of Bitcoin at least has been washed out for us. And I think that's a very good thing because to me, like the idea that money is supposed to be dramatic is, I don't want my money to be dramatic. I want my money to be predictable and like, high uptime and, everything's, we disagree. We're not going to turn off the money. We disagree. We're not going to create random fork projects.
I just love the way that it's so seamless. Like you say, I mean, we had the vote, we had the proposal, we had the vote on that, and then it just moved through every single stage, went donk, 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 and the way that it's been iterated over the years to kind of make it ridiculously efficient is great. And I loved your comment about the housewives thing. But yeah, there's none of that. There's none of that drama. There's kind of like having a 2 year cat fest or whatever you want to call it, where he said this and she said this, and then you're all wrong or whatever. But it's just like, no, you know what, the coin holders get to have their say, and that's exactly the way it should be. And for anyone that's been following this latest consensus upgrade, it literally has been that simple. The vote was for how to improve Decred's treasury expenditure. So it moves from, I think it was I can't remember, it was 150% of the 25-day block reward. It's now to a 4% type thing. Did you want to talk more about that, Dave? Just because I think I might have got a few things wrong there.
Sure. That was pretty much correct. Just basically the policy changed. And usually whenever you're talking about a policy change like that, they can actually be some of the most controversial things because they're not something that is necessarily required. And if it changes or doesn't change, sometimes it may or may not make a big difference depending on the type of policy. But if you've noticed, a lot of the actual infighting that you see about a lot of these consensus changes and other projects, a lot of it really comes down to policy. I mean, you take a look at the whole thing about op return, for example. That wasn't even a consensus change, but it just shows you like that. What was all that fighting about? It's a policy decision about, you might fall on one side of it or the other, whether you agree with it or not. But the whole point is that that's what it mostly comes down to in a lot of cases. Things that aren't very controversial generally don't have much fighting about them anyway. The only things that you constantly hear about are the things that are controversial, and that's when you need some kind of a actual decision to be made, a real formal governance structure to actually solve it, because that's when it matters. Otherwise, if nobody disagrees with it, it doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. And one of the things that Jake had mentioned before, I did kind of want to piggyback on, it's when we're talking about, since we're kind of talking about the last 10 years, I actually really agree with what he's saying, is that it's kind of a double-edged sword that things work so well. When we talk about consensus, I remember there's been a couple of consensus changes where it's happened where people try to make the argument, well, no, it just wasn't controversial. The thing I was just talking about, where it doesn't matter if it's not controversial. And that's the argument that I've seen other people saying, like, well, the system doesn't matter because it's not controversial. And it's like, so really, you mean to tell me that bricking all the ASICs in a project that is dominated by people that have spent millions of dollars on this hardware was not a controversial change? It just didn't look controversial because the system works so well that the stakeholders made a decision and it was implemented and it just ticked over and everything went fine. But like, to act like that wasn't a controversial change is it's kind of crazy to me. So I do think that the double-edged sword is that because things run smoothly, maybe it doesn't look like it's working as well as it actually is.
I think there's a lot to this. I mean, there have even been times where what is it? We have made the claims that our technology works as it actually does. There's no false claims or false advertising on our part. We're like, oh, it works like this, and people are like, you're a liar. It can't work like that. Basically, it's like literal accusations of being a liar because it works the way it's supposed to, and other stuff doesn't work like that. I mean, I think that it's shocking the extent to which basically people tolerate what I consider to be broken systems. I mean, something that I personally find kind of funny about Bitcoin is, right, that their governance system was supposed to be from launch. I mean, you can read it right there in the white paper. One CPU, one vote. It's not one CPU, one block confirmation. It's one CPU, one vote. And so, I mean, eventually they got tired and they're like, oh, we want to make a change that maybe the miners disagree with. And then, of course, it's like, oh, well, then proof of work is no good for governance. But it's perfectly good for timestamping and extending the chain, right? So it's like, where do you find in the middle? But then also at the same time, proof of work is king. Proof of work doesn't work for governance. Proof of work works to extend the chain, but proof of stake also doesn't work. So it's like, how are you supposed to reason out of that? And I think that this is part of why when we bring some of these things up to, sort of people have Bitcoin tunnel vision, they're like, you're a liar. You don't know what you're talking about.
I think we lost Dave.
I don't know if you guys follow my Twitter, but about probably less than a month ago, Luke Dash Jr. I was having a conversation with him, and he literally called me a liar because we were talking about his wanting to censor people with his voting and whatnot, and it was hilarious really, but it's not hilarious. It's actually it's disturbing because someone like that's got so many followers but doesn't do enough research to realize that other things are actually already working better than what he perceives, and especially for what he wants to do. He wants to upgrade it so he gets rid of all the junk stuff, but they've got no way of upgrading it, so he calls everything that you do junk because it's not working the way that his doesn't work. If that makes any sense, but it's not even funny though when you get down to it that these people. Dave's gone. He's gone. Come back. There he
Come
is.
back with it.
Come back, Dave. Yeah, but I mean, that in the end, I think he ended up blocking me. So it was like, it's clearly not a lie. And it's like Dave was saying about the miner upgrade. Could you imagine? I mean, see if you can imagine. Could you imagine Bitcoin main dev saying, "Look, there's a malicious miner. We need to get rid of Blake 256." What does the drama look like to you guys?
What do you mean?
Well, if they wanted to change the hashing algorithm on Bitcoin, for example, I mean, it wouldn't happen. It's that simple. Like, there's no way that they could actually make that decision and have it happen. I mean, at the end of the day, there would be a ton of fighting, of course, but at the end of the day, it just wouldn't happen.
Well, I mean, they could always say reset the chain and do everything from scratch, sort of Hcash or Decred Next style. But in terms of taking our chain and forking it, it would be prohibitively difficult for them to do that. That would be very messy for them.
Yeah, no, I was just talking about their own chain. If they had the same problem that we had, where the miners were seen to be acting against the best interests of the project, and they wanted to upgrade. So we obviously upgraded from Blake 256 to Blake 3. What would it look like on Bitcoin? When, like Dave said earlier, if you upgrade from SHA-256 and you destroy all of those thousands of dollars worth of ASIC miners, I don't see that being a year discussion or a year upgrade. I see that being multi years.
I mean, my sense of it is that they'd have a narrative problem, right? Their narrative for 15, basically since launch is we only upgrade via soft fork, and so everything is soft fork. Well, you start changing the proof of work algorithm, I believe that has to be a hard fork. So then that basically breaks their soft fork only narrative, which then would make people go, well, who else has been upgrading via hard fork and how do they do it? And then you start to look, and then you can go and see, hey, Monero does this every so often. But then, you then look and you're like, oh, well, what about Decred? And so I think that there's certain narratives that Bitcoin wants to stay away from. So anything involving hard fork changes, they do everything they can to stay away from, because it would undermine the narrative that they've built up over, basically since launch.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's what I'm thinking. That, and I just, I mean, the whole point was what Dave was saying, where it works so smoothly. And it's like, yeah, but there was no issue there. All we did was upgrade the algorithm. Yeah, it's like, yeah, no, a lot more happened than that.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, Exus, did you have anything more to add on that before I move on?
No, I think they covered it.
You guys have been brilliant, but I mean, out of interest, I mean, based on kind of how well everything's working, and if you were to build Decred again today, would there be anything that you would do differently?
Dave?
Yeah, I think we're probably going to be in agreement on this, but the main thing that I would say to change would have been just the way that we handled miners. Really, we focused on, I think we've talked about this before, but basically we focused on the technological aspect of it, in the sense of everybody understood the problem that if you have one entity or a group of entities that have too much hash power, they get control of the chain. They can basically choose whatever transactions they do and don't want to go into the chain. They essentially get unilateral control, and it causes all kinds of potential issues. And so, the part of the system design that we have, it combats that and combats it extremely well. And so it worked perfect for that. But, on the flip side of that, allowing them to have all the coins that they got from doing all that mining, allowed them to basically control the market. And if things had worked as most people assume proof of work at the time, everybody was under the assumption. I think there's still a lot of people who try to make the claim, but they talk about how proof of work sets a floor supposedly on the price of the coin, and people who are mining aren't going to be against it because it's in their best interest. So that's the typical narrative. But as we very clearly saw, that's making a whole lot of assumptions that just don't hold up in practice. If you have any kind of a competing project, for example, or if people don't want it to get off the ground, you can control their markets if you have all those coins. And so I think that's out of everything, that's the biggest mistake that we made, I think.
100% agreement on my side, which is I think what we would do is if we had to start it all over, we would turn down we would turn the mining subsidy way down, potentially even, where it is right now, and just basically make it so mining is, you're paid sort of a, like a fee for helping us timestamp everything, but large amounts of subsidy flowing to miners, I think, is a huge mistake. Because as Dave points out, the incentive, what we learned very much the hard way, and I feel like there's most proof of work projects still, I'm confused about the extent to which they live in la la land about this, or they rigged their own, mining, hash power and stuff. I'm unclear on exactly how other projects deal with it, because I feel like there's not a big incentive for another successful proof of work project to give us an honest answer here, where I don't understand how you can sit there and be like, oh yeah, proof of work is great. And it's like, dude, everything was hyper centralized in China for years and years. And so if you had a coin that was around for a long time, these people mine the hell out of your coin, and then it gives them a bully stack. They can control the price discovery process. This is the missing ingredient that I didn't really deeply understand when I was launching Decred with Ingsoc and Taco Time, which was that mining is utterly and deeply rigged, and the fact that it has weak incentive alignment allows it to be turned into a weapon. So if you have a miner and let's say you have 10% of the hash power, no matter what you do with that 10% of the hash power, you're still always going to have that 10% of the hash power. There'll be some reinvestment you have to make, obviously, to keep up, assuming people are, deploying new ASICs, but you can keep mining that 10% and then just dump it if you want to. And so there's not a lot of incentive alignment with the project there, because you're just dumping it. But then you can also stack it and then wait to dump it. And then what you end up doing is you have so many coins that pretty much nobody can come through and clear your inventory out and take that power away from you, which is what they did.
I think in many respects, this is probably wrong to say it this way, but I'm quite glad that we did, or Decred Chain did start the way it did, and it went down the route of ASIC, because reading back through all the documentation, that was generally the way that the whole industry thought the process should have been done. And I think what's really interesting from that point on, and this really shows the genuine nature of the Decred project, is almost to the minute that they found out, oh crap, this is happening, it was like, okay, how do we solve this problem? And that's one of the things I like about Decred, is it doesn't shy away from it. It doesn't say, oh, there's a problem, let's bury our heads in the sand. It says, actually, this is what the governance system was made for. We've built this governance system, we've identified a problem, we've now identified a possible solution, let's vote on it. If it goes through, fantastic. If it doesn't go through, we'll look at another one. But it really did give Decred a chance to become really battle tested because of that instance, and to say, well, actual fact, we need to do something, we need to do it now, because if this goes on for another 5 years, the scenario doesn't get better, it gets worse. This same entity holds more, and if you want to distribute all of the hash rate, it's not going to happen. It's just going to centralize it even more. So in terms of battle testing, it was nice that whole process was allowed to happen and come out the other side with something even better. Well, that's the way I feel. Do you agree with that? Do you feel like we've come out the other side better, or is there other things that we could still do to improve that?
Well, from a standpoint of, there are certain aspects where it did have a positive outcome. For example, I think that at the end of the day, like you said, showcasing that the system actually does work and it really battle tested the governance, that's one positive aspect. And I think another one that actually happened is that it did do a fairly good job in the early days, I think, before ASIC centralization, of distributing the coins out. And so that's really the unfortunate thing. I mean, obviously I talk down on proof of work mining quite a bit these days because of what happened, and the proof was all there, and so we saw the outcome of it. But I mean, it's unfortunate because I actually don't have an issue with proof of work miners in general. It's like, I mean, I think that the concept of it is great, and if it worked the way that it was supposed to, I would be 100% on board with it. I mean, obviously having good coin distribution is a noble goal and something that is really quite important for a project to have. Unfortunately, that isn't what happened, or isn't what happens in proof of work chains in reality. And so when I talk about proof of work, it's not like I want to just sit there and dog on miners just because. No, it's that the actual outcome of the system isn't what it should be, or what you would hope it would be. And so that's why. But it did in the beginning because we had GPU mining, and it was getting dual mined for a while. I remember back before ASICs came into the picture, there was actually a dual miner, I believe it was called Claymore, where people were dual mining Ethereum and Decred, and then they were just dumping the Decred. And while that wasn't great from a price discovery perspective either at the time, the benefit, of course, of dumping all those coins is that they did go to the market and they did get distributed quite well. And that was back when the subsidy was at its highest. So it certainly had a very good effect in the beginning of distributing. But then, as soon as ASIC centralization started to take over, like everything went to the same entity, and then it became completely the opposite of what it was intended to do.
I'm a little bit more metered with my feelings about miners. I'm pretty much in the camp of go F yourself to miners in general, because I think that it started out great, and then once GPUs and ASICs got into play, even with GPUs are heavily centralized because the farming of them, the amount of just straight up electricity you need to run them. I am super sour on mining as a consensus system, just because there's this theory that it's going to distribute everything. And then, I mean, part of me even questions how decentralized was the GPU mining. I think in the early first few months it was, but then my read is that the dual miner, the Claymore, took over, and then it's like, it's probably like how many farms are running the Claymore miners, and then what I've heard anecdotally is that major ETH miners were running the Claymore miner, so that they were mining large amounts of ETH at the same time they were mining the Decred and then dumping the Decred. But just like you point out, as long as the the coins end up flowing to an exchange and they get dumped, that's one thing. But it's another thing when you stack them up and then start to use them as like a effectively like you build a halberd out of stacked coins, and you start splitting people's skulls open. That's that's sort of, but that's ultimately where it ended up going. So I have much more mixed feelings than Dave C on this front.
And I think, I mean, the problem intensifies when you start to consider that the miners are in kind of cahoots with the exchanges. So when the coins end up on exchanges, they ultimately just stay there, and then what's being traded is just, I don't know, maybe paper tokens or whatever. So you do have this massive stack for anyone to whack you with or whatever. But thankfully, I think we've turned a massive corner. I think that's been 3 years now since we did the last miner upgrade from changing the algorithm and changing the percentage as well. And generally, I think we've started to see what I would call organic price discovery. I know it's still very, very low, but it certainly seems to be heading in the right direction. It seems a little bit more consistent. But yeah, I mean, that's ultimately a good thing. Anything else to add on that?
Well, just another data point to add on there would be, I don't know if you guys have noticed, but the general, we were talking earlier about or Jake was talking about how low the participation on Politape proposals was in the early days. And so if you actually kind of look at it nowadays compared to then, if you guys have noticed, the participation has gone up markedly. So isn't it interesting that after that change took place and the coins started flowing, and and basically out of the entity's hands that had them all into the rest of the people, suddenly you start to see the stake participation rise at the same time. It's a fairly interesting data point, I think.
Did you see the chart? I forget who built it, but he's built a chart that Decred Stats or something like that it's called, where you can actually see the participation increasing as the amount of available liquidity is falling. And like you said, that's exactly around the time that both of those upgrades were happening. So yeah, it's clearly heading in the right direction, and I love that stuff. the next point of discussion is Decred's privacy mechanism. How are you guys feeling about that? So we started off with coin mixing through a centralized server, and then Dave's recent upgrade, that was almost a year ago, or maybe over a year ago, where we've actually implemented a peer-to-peer mix server now built into DCRD. And privacy is definitely a massive aspect of crypto now, and there's certainly over the last few months has been a movement towards privacy coins, and people going, actually we need more and more privacy. How is Decred's privacy faring, and what have you enjoyed most over the last 10 years about our own implementations?
No, go. Yeah, so I'm really happy with the system overall. I think it's kind of interesting that whenever these discussions come up, that like everything, there are trade-offs in it. But one of the biggest things that I really like about it is that it's fairly easy to upgrade it for any kind of advances in cryptography that you have to take into account. And in fact, we're already quantum resistant with it, and also it leaves the chain on-chain subsidy, the actual supply, excuse me. It's auditable and truly auditable. We can talk about this. I actually was just having a bit of a back and forth not too long ago about this topic, where comparing it to some of the chains that are other privacy focused chains, and one of the things that they bring up is auditability comes up as a point of contention, and the unfortunate reality is that the other ones that actually have completely hidden supplies, they can be audited only insofar as the math isn't broken or the cryptography isn't broken. But that's kind of the whole point, is that you don't know for sure if it's been broken, and if you don't know for sure if it's been broken, you don't know for sure if your supply is actually what you say that it is. And certain projects, that may not be that big of a deal if you end up having a little bit of inflation due to supply being inflated. But with Decred system, that's really quite important, because the governance is tied to the amount of coins that people have. And so if somebody could basically print a whole bunch of coins and you couldn't detect it because they found a way to break the cryptography in that regard, then they could potentially have a huge influence in the governance system. So it makes a big difference. But I'm certainly pretty happy with the system. It's been working out quite well. I think that anybody who's mixing can attest to that. It certainly, it kind of just sits there and flips over by itself. Especially if you have it set up to automatically buy tickets and mix, and it just kind of works.
I mean, something that I feel like is kind of overlooked, and this connects to what Dave was saying about stealth inflation, is that the three, if you have to boil down, what are the three things that made Bitcoin, like wow? Like, one of them was deterministic issuance. The idea that there's only going to be 21 million, and then here's the issuance schedule, and then it's non-custodial, and then of course that there's an open sortition, for distribution, so that it's like the network distributes the asset. So those are sort of these three major pieces, and I feel like the deterministic issuance is super important, because especially considering the way everybody's fiat currency is going in the West lately. Everybody's getting killed by inflation. The U.S. is exporting tons of U.S. dollar inflation overseas, and as far as I can tell, sort of like the current post World War II order is on its it's on very shaky ground at this point. I mean, I think that this fourth turning is coming, and the idea of privacy is obviously great, but it's like privacy, but without the ability to super confidently state this is how many coins there are, is unsettling to me, because the incentives are so strong for somebody like, I don't know, maybe be the NSA, maybe be GCHQ, for somebody to break the encryption and go, oh, I'm going to stealth inflate this, and now I can basically print as much whatever asset as I want, because these systems are built to be opaque. And then it's like, well, what's the issuance? Well, look, we can show you how much was mined, and it's like, well, now then it depends on more assumptions going forward. I like to stick with the assumption that addition works. That's a pretty simple one. So it's like addition working, I can get down with that. I mean, in terms of what I like most about the privacy is that we made it as low complexity as we could. So we kept the complex. Everybody else has complexity in terms of privacy that's higher than ours. Like even if it's the Mimble-Wimble stuff on Litecoin, or ring signatures, or full chain membership proof plus, or zero knowledge proofs, the complexity of our privacy implementation is incredibly low in comparison to theirs. That is, there's no arithmetic circuits that need to be checked. There's no zero knowledge proof libraries, that need to be checked. It's several hundred lines of code that, I would say somebody who is, maybe they have a master's, or maybe they have, a PhD. People can figure this out and actually look at it and confirm that it works and that it's valid and there's no major exploits to it. So, that's what I think that's the part I like the most, which is that we found a way to have strong privacy guarantees without the sort of the truckload of complexity that everybody else rolls with. And, that also is in keeping with, sort of the direction of the project. Other projects are privacy first. They're there to do the craziest whiz-bang moon math that they can to create the most private asset, or so they claim. And in our case, it's like privacy is important, but it's not like, I consider things like being able to add up that all the coins have, the circulating supply is X. That matters to me more than the latest and greatest, cryptography techniques, which also open you up to, exploits. So that's the thing that I like most about it. And I guess I also like that, we were able to make it post-quantum without the privacy post-quantum without putting it on chain. So that's nice, because every time you do post-quantum, like the size of everything goes up by like 5 to 10x. So it's like, okay, if you're going to go post-quantum, now you got like bloated transactions and bloated, everything. So we were able to avoid the bloat, but still get some of the post-quantum benefits.
Yeah, I mean, it's an incredible system. It really is, and I love the fact that we've removed the centralized server now, and it's all done within the full nodes and SPV nodes. I mean, Dave's had some pretty juicy conversations on X with people trying to call him out on it, but it's been you can't argue with what Dave's saying, and they try their best, don't they? But the whole point about having an auditable supply, I'm sorry, but that doesn't go away. And the harder the maths is, it does make it. Yeah, that's what I think. But yeah, I love the way that you've responded to those, though, Dave. I think it's been brilliant.
I appreciate it. Just to add a little bit there, that's a good point that Jake makes. I think that it's quite, when I was a younger man, I certainly had a much larger desire to make some code that was extremely difficult and show how clever I was, per se. I mean, that wasn't what I was thinking at the time, but you know what I'm saying. That's generally the thing is like, oh, good, look how great I can make this, how clever it is.
Yeah.
As I've aged and actually dealt with code
Dave.
over and over, I've come to realize that it's much more difficult to make something that is actually simple and good than it is to make something super clever, right? Because you get like, okay, yeah, that's clever, that's great. Now nobody can actually audit it. Nobody knows if it actually works the way it is, and it's really easy to make mistakes. And so when you have a system that is actually quite simple and easy for a whole bunch of people to look at, you get more maintainers, and it really is it's more challenging, I would say, to make something that is both every bit as good but simple than it is to just make something that's like super complicated.
Something that I forgot about too is that one of the things that I'm also a fan of about our privacy is that because of the fact that there's all of the staking, and staking is like an active system. It's not like you just lock your coins once and then you forget about it and it just churns out subsidy by having a machine on. The fact that you have to actively, there's the locking and the unlocking of the tickets when you vote. That is really great, because that ended up dovetailing very nicely with mixing, so that the main use case for mixing to date is staking. You can stake and mix, and so by doing that you can participate in the governance, you can participate in the block creation, the chain extension process, get a reward, and be private. So all of it, I feel like it all fits together nicely. And to Dave's point about, simplicity and sort of elegance over complexity, that's a great example. Because we kept the mixing pretty simple, we were able to integrate it very straightforwardly with staking.
Do you guys do you plan on adding any more privacy features? Like, I know there had been discussion on Dandelion++, which conceals the transaction at the IP level. And would you like to see the mixing in a mobile wallet, for instance, Cake Wallet?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it isn't, from a mixing standpoint, the only mobile challenge is that you need to actually have the connection live during the mixing phase. But after you've gone through that, which is typically one epoch, maybe 10, 20 minutes, depending on where you fall. And I think it's totally doable on mobile without much effort. And so I'd certainly like to see that. As far as some other privacy thing, Dandelion plus is still on the agenda. And in fact, I'm just about to merge a PR that we're going to have Tor version 3 support again here pretty soon. So that's another way to add more privacy to it. And then, I think there's some other things kind of on the back burner for the future that we're considering as well for privacy that I don't really want to talk about at the moment.
Okay. And last thing, just based on the mobile comment, do you guys think we're going to lower the I forget what it's called, the epoch for the mixing? Right now it's 10 minutes, I believe. Do you think it could be lowered to say 5 or even 3 minutes? Just because we have so many coins mixing, I don't think it's an issue to get the participants if it's, say, every 5 minutes.
That is totally an option, but it's one of these things where we'd need to test it. I think, if I'm not mistaken, the epochs are present both are managed both by, I forget if it's both by DCRD and DCR Wallet. Or if it's, or if just one or the other. I got to go run and get a power cable. I will be right back. Sorry.
Yeah, so to finish down that, yeah, it is actually managed by both. So any kind of upgrade actually needs to happen on both simultaneously. The protocol does have the ability, some versioning, so that isn't that big of a deal. We can handle dealing with both of them, but it really needs to be simulated. I would say probably, this is a gut feeling. I have to really simulate it to say this for sure, but my guess is that going much underneath the block time, the average block time, probably wouldn't be a good idea, simply because the vast majority of the mixing ultimately comes from staking. And if you think about the way that it works, of course, whenever you have a new block, the average block is every 5 minutes, then that frees up some coins. As the coins vote, those coins generally end up buying more tickets, so therefore you end up injecting more funds into the mixing system. And so if you go much under that, I think you might start to have a little bit of issue getting enough participants in a timely fashion anyway. So I don't think it would make a big difference, but I haven't really spent a whole lot of time doing any simulation on that to say that for sure. It's just a gut feeling. But I do think that lowering it is certainly something we can do and probably should get it somewhere around at least the average block time, which is about 5 minutes.
Yeah, I think so. I think, like I said, a lot of this stuff has been good. We go on to the Crypto Quorum weekly podcast, and we talk about privacy with other communities. And one thing that did come up was the Bitcoin HD wallets, I think they were called, where once upon a time they used to have a new address for every transaction that was sent. And I did bring up the question, but isn't that standard? Decred just naturally does that. Is that not just the way it's meant to work?
Yeah, that's definitely the way it works. And I think actually there was something in the latest release. One of the things that was removed, it had been deprecated for, I don't know, 2-3 years, something like that, was the ability to essentially buy tickets back to the exact same address. And we kind of removed that ability because we want to encourage people that you really shouldn't be doing that. It's not. It's much better for you to actually use a new address for every transaction. That's the status quo. It's been that way for years. In fact, you could do it before that, but it was possible. And so. And now, it kind of forced the last remaining stragglers to actually start using a new address. And so we had some people show up in support, are like, what do I do? I can't send it the same ticket. And so like, well, so, but yeah, that's kind of interesting that people were arguing that. I mean, it seems to me like that's just the way it should be.
It wasn't necessarily being argued, but we were just talking about it, and they said, Bitcoin used to have this thing called a HD wallet, and I've never used it, so I don't really know. And they used to, every transaction was a completely new address. So I just kind of put my hand up and said, "Oh, isn't that the way it's meant to work?" And it was like, "What?" Yeah, so Decred just.
I think it's still that way, to be honest. I mean, I know that the way that their wallet works. I haven't actually sent any transactions on Bitcoin in quite a while, but I'm fairly certain it actually still does it. They just changed it. It's like, it's not called a HD address anymore because they use Taproot. But if you actually look at what's going on behind the scenes, is generating an HD address, and that HD address feeds into creating the Taproot. So it's actually still happening. I'm almost positive.
Oh, right. Yeah, no, it was just an interesting discussion, really. And I thought, that's just crazy.
I mean, my recollection, I don't follow Bitcoin Core too closely, but I did recall that, like, I think there was a release, like one of the last few releases, they're like, it finally got to the point where they're like, oh yeah, we have seed words now. And it's like, now you can back up your wallet without copying your wallet.dat. I mean, it's like, it's just crazy to me. It's like, guys, you've been doing this forever. And like pretty much every other, Bitcoin wallet has these, has the seed and, you can back it up. And it's like, okay, well, we finally decided to add this. It's like, guys, you should have done this a decade ago.
There's definitely some. I mean, these guys were Bitcoin people, so I guess they should have known better, really. But it was definitely some stuff there going. Well, this should just be standard at this point. The fact that Decred is so low down the order, and it's doing this as a standard. It's just like kind of, we shouldn't be setting the standard. It should be you guys, really. But yeah, it's absolutely crazy. But I don't know. But generally, I just think Decred has got as much or enough privacy that I currently need, and I just think it works so well. And it's I mean, I do like the fact that if for instance I was running a GoFundMe campaign, that I can still have those transparent wallets. Hey, send it here, and we can see how much we can get for a certain project or whatever. So I still like that. But certainly if you do want a bit more privacy, then it's all there, and it's great as well. And it's good to know that it probably wouldn't take too much effort to get the privacy working in Cake Wallet. And we talked to I forget who we had on the show last time about kind of getting the Cake Wallet started and making sure that, because obviously Cake Wallet is our prime mobile wallet now, and it's obviously privacy focused, so it'd be nice to make sure that kind of fits their agenda as well. So, but no, great work on the privacy. Anything more to add to that, Exodus?
No, just you use something like Ethereum or Polygon to do transactions, and just knowing everything is so linked and transparent it just gives you a bad feeling, especially if you're sending coins to exchanges and back. Whereas when you're using a privacy coin or with Decred, you just press a button and it mixes your supply. It gives you so much, it's just that feeling of security, the feeling of privacy, and obviously we're kind of in this privacy bull market of sorts, and it's becoming more and more relevant. So it's great that Decred has those features, while at the same time being completely audible. We don't have to worry about inflation bugs that can wreck our entire system. So yeah, I think we're in a really good place with that.
I think something else that I would mention is that there are a bunch more sort of privacy improvements that can be made, because there's a bunch of things where it's like, listen, if you pay attention to how privacy works, like let's say you're using Zcash and you send 150 ZC into the shielded pool, and then you withdraw 150 ZC from the shielded pool. You've just correlated yourself, right? Like there are a lot of foot gun ways to cause yourself problems on privacy chains, even if they have like full shielding, sort of like Zcash does. And the same kinds of problems apply with Decred. But I think that the kind of thing that you'll probably see from us is more incremental stuff, like Dandelion ++. Maybe we'll have maybe we can add things like anti-foot gun countermeasures. Like we saw that you just put 150 into your mixed account or into your unmixed account, and it mixed, and then you try to spend 150. Goes, whoa, slow down, buddy. You're gonna blow your foot off here. So you want to break it up into pieces or something, right? So you don't get correlated as easily. So things like that matter, and I think that that's sort of what you can expect to see on the privacy front in the future, which is there's things we can do, but it's not like we're going to completely gut and redesign the mixing system. And I mean, that's one of the things that I think is great about our mixing system is that unlike say Monero had a problem with ring signatures. I forget exactly. I mean, maybe Dave knows a little bit about it. Is exactly what the exploit was to effectively reduce the mix-in count, where it would take it like from like it would reduce it to 25% of the original mix-in count effectively. I don't know exactly how that worked, but my recollection is that was what was driving their full chain membership proof ++ stuff. So one thing that's nice is that we have effectively a multi-party computation that is our mixing process. Everyone gets together, participates, and then we all jumble our coins together. Now, one thing that's nice about that is that there are actual participants, right? None of these things are fake. It's not like these are decoy inputs. They're all real. So it's not like you can look at it and be like, oh, let me do this, like, let me do this attack, and then I can reduce it. I can figure out who everybody is. Whereas apparently, I mean, and I had no idea about this until relatively recently, there's some kind of, there's issues with ring signatures, which is surprising to me. So, that's one of the things I like about our process that's different. However, that said, it is a multi-party computation, and then you have to wait for it to complete, just like Exodus was pointing out, right? You got to wait an epoch for the mix to complete. And that can be very boring. That can be very annoying, depending if you're on mobile. And then, so it's sort of like strong single-party computation, which would be like, Monero and Zcash, and then strong multi-party computation would be really kind of what we do in terms of our mixing process. I guess that's the last thing I wanted to say.
Oh, great stuff. So in terms of Decred's 10th birthday, the way I kind of look at a lot of previous software developments, once you get to the 10th year or thereabouts, it tends to be that you've got this feature complete product. Now, we're fortunate in the Decred world that about a year ago, so we kind of hit that point where everything that was on that original roadmap kind of happened. And it was so impressive. That day was like, wow, actually all of those targets that were set out all those years ago have actually been complete. And now we can start looking forward to the next chapter. And one thing that I always think tends to happen in the next part is that the good projects tend to find efficiency improvements. They tend to kind of look at making the software better, kind of getting rid of stuff that doesn't work, and just kind of looking at all those efficiencies. In terms of that kind of phase, how's that looking? What kind of stuff are we doing in that area? And how's it going basically?
Yeah, that's basically my primary focus at the moment, is taking care of, call it technical debt in the programming world, but basically things that have built up over time that work fine, but aren't necessarily the best way you could go about it or the most efficient and things like that. But that's a big thing. I've been going back and tackling all that. New features will be coming at this as well, but I think a lot of the things that I'll be working on in the immediate future probably won't necessarily be directly visible to people, other than the fact that it just feels snappier, or maybe you can sync the chain faster and things like that. I know that sometimes I worry about that to a certain degree, because that stuff isn't necessarily something that catches headlines, so to speak, or it may not be all that interesting to a lot of people, but it really is important, because if you don't have that, I think that people who actually go and try another chain, they'll sit there and they'll be like, wow, what the heck is taking so long? This is like it's in molasses. This is crazy. And part of the reason that the chain stays so fast is because we actually do take the performance seriously and strive to make sure that it can continue to run on low power devices like Raspberry Pis or anything like that. So there's definitely going to be more work in that realm. On the plus side there as well is that most of the big optimizations that are left were identified quite some time ago, and there really aren't all that many left, to the point where I don't want to put an exact time frame on it, but I'll just say that, like, once those are in, the ultimately you'll be able to completely sync the chain from scratch, probably within 5 to 10 minutes, no matter how big it ever gets. And that's a big problem, because it's currently for everybody really, and almost all cryptocurrencies, is one of the things that happens, obviously, is that as you get more and more transactions, the chains continue to grow. And then so therefore you need some form of pruning. And, we've put a lot of effort over the years into making sure that we can prune. In fact, that's another really nice thing about our privacy system, to circle back a little bit to that conversation, is that we can truly prune, not the kind of pruning where you just have to take everything and sort of split it up amongst nodes, which is it's an approach, but you're not really pruning per se in that. You're just actually splitting all the data. The data is still growing. It's still getting bigger. You're just splitting it out amongst more nodes. But the overall, so, one of the things that we'll ultimately be able to do is truly prune to the point where the only thing you download is the UTXO set, and it'll have everything in place to be able to prove that it's all correct and hasn't been tampered with, and all of those types of things that need to happen. And then once that's in place, the chain could get up to be a petabyte or whatever, and it won't matter. You'll still be able to sync within 5 to 10 minutes. So that's kind of the ultimate goal there.
there aren't many chains out there that can say, hey, we're Solana and Exodus gone. We're Solana and we're 20 terabytes and we can sync in 5 minutes. There's not many chains that can say that.
So do you have a 1 gig or a 10 gig link in your data center? Right. I mean, something. I mean, on this topic, I will say something. Is I think that even though we released it I guess it's 3.5 years ago now, we released Bison Relay, and it's like I think that I've been talking about this a fair amount in the trading channel too, which is I feel like there's cryptocurrencies have a problem, and the problem is the pet rock problem. Tivra has coined a term for Bitcoin. I think he coined this term, which is that he refers to it as a boomer rock. So he feels like Bitcoin is becoming a boomer rock, but if you kind of follow that where that rabbit hole goes, is that becomes it goes down the paper trading rabbit hole, which is that once you have an asset that doesn't move around a lot, like gold or silver or any number of commodities. Once you have some of these assets that don't move around so much and are traditionally regarded as stores of value, you have a problem, which is that whoever custodies them can start to do sketchy stuff with them. Like, for example, if an exchange is handling all these gold contracts, what's to say they can't create derivatives based on those gold contracts? And sort of this layering problem happens, and I jokingly referred to it as paperization. So the idea, instead of going from, say, Bitcoin to paper Bitcoin, there's a lot more paper Bitcoin than there is actual Bitcoin. And then, the only reason that can really happen is because it's sitting in some centralized, custodian's account on Coinbase or whatever. And so that process, as much as I feel like everyone wants this institutional involvement, it's also double-edged. Once you get the institutions involved, they're going to accumulate the asset. They're going to stuff it all in a box on Coinbase. And then once it's sitting in a box on Coinbase, then they can go, well, now we're going to do some derivatives. Now we're going to do some futures. We're going to do some options. We're going to do perpetual futures. We're going to do cash settled futures. All these wacky jacky things can be synthesized on the basis of assets that don't move around. This is also why I think sort of the future is really, finding ways to take cryptocurrency and make it actively self-custodied and used. And this was why, this was kind of the big picture driver behind Bison Relay, which is that if you have funds that sit places, people can use it as a way to scam you. And so the hope is that, we can find a way to actively use things like cryptocurrency more often. And social media is only becoming more censored as a function of time. Something I find personally entertaining is that everyone's like, oh, Musk is going to buy Twitter and it's going to get so much better. It did not. I actually had to discard one of my Twitter accounts because it was basically permanently hosed. It was like perma shadow banned. And so I had to just junk it and create a new account. And it speaks to how screwed up the censorship of social media is. And so I think that sort of, going forward, a lot of the base layer one stuff in Decred is, in my opinion, done or mostly done. There's other things we can do, just like Dave C points out, but it becomes this sort of like, well, how should we do it, and what should we do, and how on chain should it be? Because it's like, do you want people shoving JPEGs in your blockchain? I don't. And so the direction that I think things need to go is people need to find, people need to create and generate ways of actively self-custodying and using cryptocurrency on a daily basis. And that's, I'm always on Bison Relay, so I'm always messaging, I'm always posting stuff. And as a function of that, it's like, that's how I sort of see the future of cryptocurrency. Everyone needs to lean in a little bit more and then actively use it. And if you look at other chains, Monero has done an excellent job of reinforcing its own circular economy, where it's like they want people to spend it, they want people to go out to the store and use it. But I think that if you ask the question, what is the first thing, and of course then there's also the darknet markets, which I believe all use Monero, if I'm not mistaken. So if you step it down a notch and you go, okay, the darknet markets are black, those are black markets. You can get arrested and get in trouble for them. Okay, Monero's a good fit for them. But then if you step it down, you go, well, what's the next thing that's not quite a black market, but is scarce and in demand, is the ability to have communications that are not surveilled and manipulated. And I feel like that is, that's sort of the direction that I see things going in the future with Decred, which is that if we can deliver a network like that and, find a good fit with, with people who use it, then a network like that could provide both real value to human society and then also, reinforce active self-custody of coins.
Yeah, another Tivra coined phrase was the everything app, which was referred to buy some relay, and it's absolutely true. Having an app that can facilitate so many things, where all of this stuff isn't on chain, it's peer-to-peer discussions that use microtransactions, is absolutely great. And I think you were referring to the ordinal discussions that's currently happening. We've got some proposals up for discussions about stuffing JPEGs on chain, and it's not really something I want to see. And I understand that people want to do this and they love the NFTs and things like that. I'm personally more in favor of trying to do it off chain, so that we keep that layer one as streamlined as possible. And I think this is why the team put the Lightning Network in place, and to date, it works very, very well. And I know Joel and the Crypto Quorum are always kind of getting at me when I talk about Decred's Lightning Network. And I said, well, ultimately I use it every day. I use it non-custodially. I'm talking to Jake, I'm talking to Exodus, I'm talking to Dave, I'm talking to a whole bunch of other people. I'm posting my thoughts on the social media side of things, and tipping people and having these discussions. And it does work. Is it seamless? No. But it does work, and it's very, very good. And to lean more into that for all of the use cases that people want, to lean more into that and create the everything app there, makes complete sense to me, really. And I love the fact that you've built Bison Relay, and it's absolutely fantastic. I think that was what I wanted to say about that. Any other thoughts, guys?
We had a question from the community. This was DM'd me privately, but it was based on given Decred's recent price action. It's going up. I think we moved from number 280 on CoinMarketCap to now about 85. Do you guys think the proof of work miners who are dumping these coins, do you think they've run out? Do you think that this entity or whatever has been crushed? Because that consensus change did go live, 4 years ago, 3.5 years ago, to kind of reduce the subsidy to miners from 60 to 10. So basically, do you think they've run out of coins, given that Bitcoin is now going down and Decred is going up against the entire market?
I mean, my estimate is that the miners, because of our subsidy change, we went from 60% to 10% to 1% for mining subsidy. Because of those changes, we have tightened the inventory substantially on what I think is the most accurate way to refer to it as the mining cartel, whether it's one person or a group. The cartel does not. The cartel seems to have limited inventory. There's only so many coins that they have. Exactly how many coins they have is unclear. I have some guesses. I'd be surprised if they have more than 1 million coins left. And, in terms of things I've seen, it seems like they're on the back foot. And the reason I say it seems is you really never know. All I can say about this is that, to me, it's still mind-blowing to me that what we've seen has been corroborated by almost no one in a substantive project. I've seen a few sort of like sketchy sort of fly-by-night pump and dump type operations be like, there's the entity or whatever, right, about the miner, the mining cartel. Like all of a sudden out of nowhere, ASICs show up, and it's like the project launched just a little bit ago, and now it's getting flattened by ASICs. So, some people see this, but what's mind-blowing to me is, given what we've seen, I'm very surprised that no one else has called this stuff out. Like, I believe we are probably the only, if not one of just a few projects that have both recognized this problem and publicly, talked about it. And I think we're probably the only ones who've actually taken corrective action. So, I feel like they're on the back foot, but maybe they won't be. It's hard, it's hard to, read the minds of an organization. The other thing to keep in mind about the miners is that the miners have been at this for a very long time. They've been at this since at least 2017, if not all the way back in 2016 post launch. So understanding what the threat model is challenging, but I do get the sense that they're somewhat on the back foot. That's my read. I like to be optimistic too. I try to be a, the glass is almost half full kind of guy.
So I was just checking that the actual consensus change went live as far as the changeover and the proof of work in August, at the end of August, 29th, in fact, of 2023. So, yeah.
I mean, it's, in my opinion, it certainly does feel like there is that supply shock, and people are kind of seeing this or talking about it on Twitter. 62% of the supply is staked, 5% is in the treasury, and then we've had this bear market for the last 4 or 5 years of just accumulation. We've seen activity on the DEX. People are trading Bitcoin for Decred. And eventually that supply shock is going to happen because the inflation curve is just going down, or the deflation curve, whatever you want to call it. So I think that for, in my opinion, that just is playing out.
It really does. It really does look that way. Oh, go ahead, Phoenix.
I was gonna agree, and I think, I mean, just to go on to that, what the comments said was basically this is the first time that we've seen in 4 or 5 years where we've seen Bitcoin go down and Decred not go down 10 times as much. This is the first time where it's actually gone in the opposite direction significantly. So, I would probably conclude that by saying, although they may not be on the back foot, they're now being forced to play a more realistic game. So that's only good for the project, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good thing. Things are looking up, and I feel like the books on the DEX are looking better. The amount of trades on the three on both on Binance and on DEX and on MEXC. It seems like volume is up, and things are there's actual price. There's positive price action, which is welcome considering everything we've seen.
Yeah, the DEX books look really good lately to where oftentimes you can get better prices on the DEX than you can on Binance. It's just a matter of you having the lot size of 40 Decred or the equivalent in Bitcoin and understanding how atomic swaps work. So I highly recommend everyone check out Bison Wallet. Get set up there, and it's a great place to trade Decred. And hopefully we see a transition to the stablecoin markets a little bit. Currently, Decred Bitcoin is great though.
Which goes straight into what my next point then is basically we've got to the 10-year point. What's now the barrier to entry for Decred? What should we be looking for over the next 10 years? And let's think about this long term rather than we want a quick fix, obviously. But what should we be looking to do to kind of decrease the barrier to entry for new people and crypto people alike?
So I think probably the most challenging part is, like when you talk about the barrier to entry, is just not being on exchanges. And unfortunately, there isn't too much we can do more than we've already have for that. I think eventually and ultimately it's going to happen simply because they're not going to have a choice after eventually. But that's probably the biggest thing as far as I can tell as far as the barrier to entry there. Aside from that, yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty much it. The software, to me, I mean, granted, I've been at this a long time, but it seems like it's pretty easy to use, especially like, I mean, Exeter just mentioned Bison Wallet. I mean, you can go through. I've done experiments with people in IRL, so to speak, outside of people that I actually know in person. And I've watched them go through the process, and then I've had them do the same thing with going through, say, Coinbase or getting on an exchange and going through KYC. And the comments are pretty much universally like, why the heck would I do the other? We're talking about the KYC. It's easier. It's literally easier to just get on the Bison wallet or even Decred on whatever. The only problem is getting the original Decred. And I do have the benefit of being able to send them some Decred with people that I'm working with, whereas a person who isn't in that position would have a harder time getting the original. But I mean, once you actually have any cryptocurrency, once you're in the ecosystem, you can get it into Decred very easily, and you can completely skip the entirety of all the KYC side of things, having to send them all the information, what you ate that day and everything that comes with it, how many kids you have and everything else that they want to know. It's literally less than 10 minutes you're up and going. And so I don't think it's that difficult, really for anybody that seriously wants to try it at that part. Like I said, just getting the initial coins is the hard part, and I do agree that's probably the biggest challenge to overcome.
I mean, I think that in line with Dave, it's the direction things are going to be going is focusing more on things like markets and adoption and sort of, trying to get people onto Bison Relay, that kind of stuff, where what we do is we try to build our networks and then build them up. I mean, to be honest, there's been we really neglected, I think, the market side of things, because we're really fundamentally tech people. Like, we're here to build tech, not to go like, oh man, how do I rig the markets? And obviously, miners have taken advantage of that, and so I feel like we're trying to we're working to turn the tables on that, and then the people working on Bison Wallet are sort of pushing, they're pushing the log on that front.
Yeah, one thing I would like to see is definitely a push for being able to use Decred as a medium of exchange. One big blocker is the BTC Pay server. If we could get on that, we could then do the gift cards on Cake Wallet using Cake Pay. But from what I've kind of seen, BTC Pay server is just blocking it, and they're not doing it. But ultimately, I would like to see just more and more integrations, more exchange listings. We did just get on Bitmart and some other Chinese exchange. They just listed us. We didn't do anything, which is awesome, which normally isn't the case, by the way. Normally you do have to pay. So I think that's going to be the case moving forward for Kraken and Coinbase. It's going to get to the point where they have to list Decred. Currently, we're at rank number 85 on CoinMarketCap, and all the coins around us are on everything except Decred. And it really makes you kind of wonder. Decred was launched, from what I understand, it was launched 10 years ago from Chicago by primarily American developers. I think that's accurate to say. You guys are based out of Chicago.
Almost exclusively.
Texas, Florida. I know Buck is in Wisconsin. And it's like, why is there this disconnect of getting on these U.S. exchanges? I don't know if you guys have any input on that, or if you'd like to comment on that.
Dave?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't know. We've worked with different exchanges in the past. We helped them even develop some of their APIs that ultimately would allow them to add other coins. We made sure we implemented it. We followed all the procedures that they've asked for. There was even times in the past where we offered to pay, and it just never seems to happen. So, I mean, I'm not a big person to get into conspiracies too much, but it really seems like there were some people very high up that just didn't want it to happen and successfully managed to block it. And of course, eventually those people are going to leave. And so that's why I know eventually we're going to end up on them. As far as why it hasn't happened, I honestly don't know. It's not from our side, though. I can say that we've tried. We've done everything that we can reasonably do, and it's just been blocked.
And what Dave said is accurate. I mean, and I said a little bit about it earlier, is I think that there's a couple things that I think are major drivers with the exchanges. Is, at this point, I'm really, hey, if we don't, I have tried to build my life around not needing to be on these exchanges, because I was like, you know what, I don't like the process of these listings. And so as a function of that, we created the DEX, and I feel like the fact that our project is, there's the two aspects of it. One, we don't have any major VC investors that I'm aware of, unless they've done a very good job keeping themselves covert. We do not have any major VC investors. And then everything we do is like direct sovereignty. We have direct sovereignty systems. That is like sort of the opposite of how the exchange world is. And so the exchange world is like, no, your direct sovereignty is a great idea, but now give us your coins, and then trust us. And so that sort of like runs counter to to sort of the whole ethos of the space. So it's like, it's one of these things where I have mixed feelings about it, and I think that if they want to do it, then we can do it. But it's one of these things where it's not me, it's you. And I feel like, hey, I'm trying to work with you, but I'm also not willing to, really make any major sacrifices to jump through major hoops to make this stuff happen. And so I feel like, hey, if we get listed, that's great, because then that means more accessibility. But then there's also downsides, like I was talking about with paperization, right? Like, or the people might call it financialization, but I feel like it's worse than that. It's not just financialization. It's like synthesizing paper assets so that you can like screw with the supply of something when there's a constrained supply. So I feel like I have mixed feelings about it, and I'm just gonna keep trucking and trying to build my life around not needing those options, because hey, we tried, and so it didn't work out the way that we had wanted.
Yeah, and one thing I've been pointing out to people is we do know that Decred, in Decred's case, most of the supply is self-custodied, which I think if you compare that to many other crypto assets, it's the complete opposite, where most of the assets are on Binance or on these exchanges, and that's what the exchanges want. They want a percentage of the supply in their hands, and obviously in Decred's case, that's never going to happen.
Thus the, hey, we're not that interested. I mean, the other thing to consider is that there may be people who don't like Decred. I mean, my understanding of these major exchange listings is that it's a lot of it is about insider power. Like, you don't get listed because you have the best tech. You get listed because one of the big investors in your project is on the board or knows a guy on the board, and then it becomes this like sort of like nepotistic political process to like, oh, one of these board members doesn't like you, now you got to figure out what to do to like to get them on your side. I mean, and the way the whole process works, I get the impression that I would be unsurprised to find that there is a vocal minority of people who are like, I don't like this project, and then that's enough to spike it. But it could also just be that they don't like our direct sovereignty, our direct sovereignty system, and the fact that we self custody most of our stuff, whether it's me or anybody else who participates in the project. So it's hard to say how things are going to shake out, but it'd be nice to get those listings. But yeah, it seems like it's there's something that doesn't pencil out when you consider that everybody else who's well ranked has these listings, and we just for whatever reason don't, despite never being given a very clear reason.
Especially considering back in the day, you guys built Decred explicitly to answer the problem of Bitcoin's governance. So it's highly possible they'd never wanted Decred to be big because it explicitly calls that out and says, hey, Bitcoin has no governance model, and in Decred we built this specifically to address that. So that's one thing I've always seen. But recently with our price action, hey, maybe we don't need these exchanges as much as we think.
Hey, that'd be great. I'd love for that to shake out.
Yeah, I think so. That's the dream. And like you say, with so many coins being sovereign and self custody, it really is good for the project. And you do see or have conversations with projects like Yocom-Piatt where they are actively getting their communities to get their coins off of the exchanges, so they stop being used against them. So it's definitely one problem that Decred has kind of mitigated. There is a question from Kazel. He's got two questions. It says, in the last 10 years of running the project, were there any moments that seriously made you doubt that you would make it to 10 years, apart from maybe obviously the mining shenanigans?
For me personally, no. In fact, once all the mining shenanigans were discovered and we decided to address it, I was more determined because it kind of pissed me off, to be honest. So there you go. So for me, no.
There were definitely some moments like where you're talking to an exchange about a listing, and it's like it isn't going the way that you thought it would go, and but at the same time, I'm also just kind of like, whatever. I'm not really going to sweat the small stuff. I don't change course easily. It takes a lot for me to like be like, oh, I got to go do something else. Like, if things had cratered into the ground, like, and been absolutely flattened, okay, maybe I could see myself like eventually under certain circumstances bailing, but it never came close to that. And like, that's just, I don't know about Dave, but it's like, that's just not how I roll. I'm going down with the ship kind of guy. I'm that guy. So, in terms of making it to 10 years, there were moments where I was like, man, we could make a junk token and kill it, right? But I was like, also, I don't like that. Ethically, I'm not really behind that. I don't like that. I don't like to do stuff like that. But there were moments where I was like, oh, maybe we should. And then I was like, nah, it's not my thing.
Yeah, I think so. And I'm very much of the mindset similar to when I find something that really clicks with me. I just want more of it, you know. And that's been my deciding factor with Decred is over the last, I don't know, 6-7 years. 6-7 years that I've been involved in the project. I've never once gone, oh, this isn't working the way I would research, or this isn't the way working the way that I thought it was. It's all been pretty much, oh my god, and there's this extra thing that I didn't even realize. Oh, there's this extra thing that I hadn't realized it had done. And every bit of research that I've ever done, there's always been something else that's actually enhanced that kind of that feeling of this is absolutely incredible, and I can't believe what's happened here. So yeah, that's good then.
You know, they're actually so if I had to think back, the things that probably the things that dinged me the most was when both Taco Time and Ingsoc basically like poof ghosted. It was I think that it wasn't a moment that made me quit. It was just really annoying. It's like, oh, like I wasn't planning on you guys to disappear. And I'm Dave, I'm sure Dave remembers that. It's like, oh, I'm here and then I'm gone. And so I thought that was very annoying. Everybody has their reasons, but I thought that was it was irritating, where it was like, man, okay, well, we can keep this ball rolling, but it was a lot easier with you helping push it, right? So, but apart from that, I don't think we've really had that many moments where it was like, oh, like somebody hit you in the stomach or something.
Yeah, there's been a few moments. So, like I say, when community members kind of they either disappear or they start saying things that don't align with their original thought processes, and there's been a few of those moments. And some of the big players. I mean, if you guys want to elaborate on anything we're allowed to talk about why certain key members left or whatever, that'd be quite nice. But it doesn't really matter. But when they, it always makes me think, oh, what did they see that I didn't see, and it kind of makes me delve in even more, and generally at that moment I just go, hey Dave, what's going on?
I mean, from my perspective, that's pretty easy. I'm not going to call anybody out in particular or anything, but I've really only seen two real reasons why anybody who's left has actually left. And the number one by far is the price isn't doing as well as they wanted. I mean, that is almost always it. And then the other one, the other main one I've seen was just that they weren't interested in cryptocurrencies or anything anymore. They just, people move on with their lives. They have other things. Their interest changed, whatever the case is. So those are the only two main reasons that I can think of that anybody's left for. Yeah.
Yeah, it's about the same. I mean, it's like so many other things. Like, I don't know. It's almost always the money, and I feel like one of the things that I've seen is that, like, I'm pretty familiar with sushi restaurants. I eat a lot of sushi, and I'm an investor in a sushi restaurant. And what I've seen is that sushi restaurants tend to, if a chef ever disappears or anything bad happens, it's always the money. It's always like somebody's getting screwed about money. And so I feel like that's a major driver for a lot of things in the space. The other thing that I have seen that I figure is worth mentioning is I feel like there are certain people who were sent as trolls, and then what they do is then they flip-flop. They act like, oh no, I'm a big supporter. Oh, I hold all this asset. It's like, you do not hold on that much of what Decred. You don't hold that much Decred. And then you're gonna act like we ruined your life or something, and it's like, dude, we did not do that. We're not pitching you. We're not like hard selling you. We're not doing anything. And then like people like lose it. So there are some people who roll like that. But I mean, my read is that a lot of the people who fall into this bucket, some of them are okay, you gotta what is it, a psychological issue that you need to work on. But then I think there are a lot of these people who are literal, they're plants. They're there to go, oh, I lost all this money. And it's like, did you? I don't know about that, I feel like we see some of that too. So it's a mix. I think it's a combination of money and then provocateurs here and there, and then a little bit of psychological problems for some people.
I mean, you think how principled. I mean, even going back when I started in crypto, which is a lot after you guys, and how principled a lot of people that I was listening to at the time were, we want sovereignty, we want sound money, we want open source, we want this, that, and the other. And I mean, has it surprised you how many people it turns out of all of those masses of influential crypto people have turned out just to be there for the money? I mean, I would say probably a year ago it surprised me, or maybe 2 or 3 years ago it surprised me. Oh, these people are just in it for the money. But I mean, at what point did it just turn in? Oh, this no longer about the principles, no longer about the sound money, the Austrian economics, and all the rest of it. It's all about actually, I just want to make more dollars.
Well, I can tell you there's a line that cuts through all this, and there's a reason that we're the way we are, and there's a reason that people who are like that are the way they are. You can ask one question. Have you ever contributed to an open source project that wasn't a cryptocurrency? And that question will cut people in half. That'll leave 90, 95, probably 99% of people in the space have never contributed to an open source project. And they're just here for the money. They do open source, and not because they care about it or they agree with or align with any of these principles. They do it strictly because of the money. There's no other calculus running in their brain. And that became clear after a while, where it's like, if you ask what were we doing before this, we were actually writing a lot of open source code, and we were trying to have open source services as a matter of principle and a matter of security, as opposed to, oh, we're just doing this because we're going to pump and dump some token. So I feel like that's something that separates us from most people in the space. Now a lot of the early Bitcoin core guys were in that bucket too, but I also feel like they had their Bitcoin, because it blew up so much, and got so big, it really changed people. Money changes a lot of people. I mean, I've observed it. That is, that if you run a successful business that isn't a cryptocurrency business, there are a lot of people. I'd probably say I wouldn't be surprised if it's 80% of people. Their personalities will undergo a massive change as a function of success. That is, that you start somebody out, you give them 10 grand or whatever, they're working some kind of, they're working a wage job, they're fine. You give them $1 million, all of a sudden they're a psychopath. And I feel like, so there's going to be this, who did open source to begin with, and then who can actually withstand the money, because most people can't. Most people will just, you get I made $1 million. Oh, I'm going to start bossing people around. I'm going to start basically being a jerk. And because I'm successful, I'm the person who made the money, and so we're not like that. And so, that's one thing that I really like about working with Dave and J. Rick and D Hill and my brother, Al, is that we're not those people. We're not the people who lose it and become crazy because we think we're the coolest people on the block, or because, number go up. It's it's just a number. It's cool. I'm glad it's going up, but I'm not going to be like, I'm better than everybody else because the number went up, or I don't have to listen to other people because the number went up. So I feel like that's, these are the kind of things that I think are sort of drive problems in the space.
Yeah, for me, as far as whether it surprised me, yeah, definitely. I mean, obviously, I'm fully aware that people follow incentives, and they're going to, for the most part, do whatever they're incentivized to do. In fact, a lot of Decred's design is specifically taking that into account. But there was a time, probably a few years in, where it did kind of surprise me, just to the amount or the degree to which everything that most people seem to claim to care about, they really don't. It all comes down to if that number is whatever they want or not, right?
2017 was when it got really bad. Basically, late 2016 and then through 2017, it was money, 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 and it was through 2016, a lot of it was people oh yeah, I'm really interested in this. Oh, I'm really into it. And then 2017 happened, and it was oh man, it got really bad really quick.
Had people that were adamant, they were completely on board about the fact that they really want to make sure that things are decentralized and self-sovereignty and all the general things that really make a big difference. They're 100% on board and everything. And then when the price didn't go up enough, poof. And then, oh well, I found out
Where
if
did
I
they
talk
go?
about Bitcoin, I make a lot more money. So Bitcoin is the bee's knees. It's like, oh really?
Mhm.
Okay. It was like, it's like I said, people follow incentives, so it doesn't really surprise me. But the degree to which it happened, yeah, it was a little bit surprising. But that was years ago, and it's just what it is.
Have you guys found it challenging to find new developers to work in the environment that is Decred, where it's open source and you have to kind of prove your worth before you get paid and get brought on? Because it feels like we have a set of developers who are like rock solid, but if they leave the project, it's going to be really difficult to replace them.
Yes and no. I mean, again, I think a lot of that comes back to the number. Unfortunately, that's what it really is. Is that whenever there's a big surge, I almost always start to see new pull requests from people, and people kind of show up, and that pretty much it's very much tied to that to a large degree. Now, I also would say that I think that's another one of those cases that's probably a double-edged sword. Having a little bit of a barrier to entry, the way that it does, really immediately weeds out a lot of people that probably shouldn't be working on it to begin with. I know that sounds perhaps a little negative, but it depends on in what area. I don't think it's very difficult at all, for example, to get people to work in certain areas that are a little bit higher up in the stack where there's a much larger margin for area. And what did I just say? A much larger margin for error. So
How many square feet?
So from that perspective, I don't really think it's all that difficult to get people involved, and that's a good thing, because if you make a mistake in an area where it doesn't matter as much, it isn't that big of a deal. When it comes to consensus code, yeah, I mean that's very challenging to get into, and I don't think that is particular to Decred. I mean, you can look at pretty much any project, and there are only a handful of people who are doing the consensus work, and it really kind of has to be that way, because there are only a handful of people who really have the drive, right? It's not the skill, right? I mean, you could take pretty much anybody and they can eventually become a really good consensus engineer if they put it. But it does take a certain mindset and a certain singular drive that you have to realize that what you're dealing with here are things that if you mess this up, you will kill the network and you will cost billions of dollars in damage. So I mean, that's the kind of thing. It takes there are only a handful of people who are willing to take on that risk and have the drive that it takes to take it to completion. And so I think from that regard, is it difficult to get involved? Yes, but I think it should be, and I think it needs to be. So yeah, that's where I land on that.
Well, and what Dave's saying about sort of people, and you guys have observed about people proving themselves, is we really operate more like a normal open source project. And just like I was saying earlier, open source projects are confusing or foreign to most of the people who work in the space. So most people who work in the cryptocurrency domain are there for the money. They only know open source code from cryptocurrency, or hey, maybe they run Linux, and that's about it. It's not like most of these people aren't package maintainers or kernel developers or userland developers for operating systems. These people have like no idea how open source works, which is why we have people show up and be what I would describe as obnoxious or annoying sometimes with the source code. And what do I mean by that? Like the expectation that, oh, you showed up and made a pull request and so we should pay you. And it's like, no, it could be junk. And now we have to spend our time checking to see if your code is actually good and then merge it. And then are you going to respond to comments? Are you going to update the code? So we've dealt with all kinds of people over the years, basically, screwball people who show up out of nowhere and are like pushy and annoying. And we haven't gotten those for a while, mainly because of the price action we haven't had. And I feel like the overall process is really just, again, it's an open source process. You show up, you interact with the devs, you need to demonstrate value before we will waste our time, onboarding you. This is not some, fail fast VC funded dumpster fire where we're trying to pump and dump toxic sludge onto retail. In a model like that, if your goal is to push garbage out the door as quickly as possible so that you can like pour it onto retail, IPO, and then everybody dumps their shares, that model can work. And then you hire a bunch of randos from South Asia or whatever, and then they make spaghetti code. Nobody can maintain it, and it doesn't matter. And but that's not how. Well, first off, and that's the other thing about open source. That's not how open source works. You don't do that in open source. You don't push complete garbage code, because most of the time somebody will be like, whoa, we're not putting that in. Like Dave, I mean, try to push garbage code with Dave. Dave's gonna break it down real quick why that isn't gonna get merged. And then unless you do the dance and you fix it, it's not gonna go anywhere. So I feel like the new developer game, if people can show up and they have the skills, we're interested. But we're also not, we're not a startup. We're not a VC startup where it's like we're constantly trying to onboard noobs who just got out of college and teach them, and have our senior developers waste all their time onboarding people. We want skilled people to show up and be like, I think this is cool, so I want to work on this, as opposed to this other way around where we solicit people and try to like upskill them, because that's a huge time sink for skilled devs.
Yeah, some really good points. Before I go into the next bit, guys in the audience, if you have a question for Jake and Dave, post in the comments. Obviously, this is a rare opportunity to get these guys together. So if there's,
I did have one more point that I forgot, because I was kind of ranting about the dev onboarding and stuff a bit, which is, I know that there's like, it'd obviously be bad if we lost any of our key developers, right? But the way things are looking, and this goes back to what you were saying about completeness, is I feel like a lot of the L1 it's pretty solid. I mean, it's where it is, and and it's not like, holy moly, we're going to change everything over to like an Ethereum virtual machine system or something, right? We're going to keep it mostly as is, and so I feel like the threat model of what if we lose the devs is not as serious as it would be if we were still like, we didn't have privacy, we didn't have treasury, we didn't have the smooth consensus changes. If there were all these pieces we were missing, losing developers when you're building big chunks of infrastructure is much more of a problem. So it's like a lot of these pieces have already been built.
Yeah, Jake kind of touched on it. I was going to jump in there and say something similar, in that the fact that if you look at the way the backbone of the network right now, it could be left completely as it is for the next decade, and it would be perfectly fine. I mean, it's really that efficient and that good. Now, are there a lot of things I want to make better? Of course, yes. In fact, make it like I was mentioning earlier. But the reality of the situation is that even if every single developer would have never touched that thing again for the next decade, the network would be perfectly fine, and beyond, really. But you might start to have a longer sync times where it might get a little bit painful if it hadn't been touched at all in 10 years, for example. But yeah, it's like it as Jake basically said, it really is feature complete, and at the point where the software, nobody would really have to touch it and be fine.
I'm reminded of the tagline, I believe it was for Timex: "It takes a licking and keeps on ticking."
I always like Dave's approach in the comments is do it once and do it right, or maybe it's the other way around, do it right and do it once, or something like that. But I certainly think that's the way Dave approaches it. So you're not kind of chucking loads of stuff in and then having to come back to it later, which does tend to be quite a common approach. But as I was saying to the guys in the audience, if you've got a question for Jake or Dave, do it now. Obviously, this is a rare opportunity to get these guys together, and we really appreciate you guys being on and kind of talking about this stuff. And just to kind of finalize that point, we are entering a world where they call it vibe coding, which I've had a little go at some of this stuff, and it's really, I quite like it for personal projects and to look at things and just have a look at things and try things out. But I mean, what are your guys' thoughts on that going forward? What problems is it going to cause to it probably won't cause very much to Decred, but what problems is this going to cause to projects like Digibyte, for instance, where their founder has openly said he's developing code now using this?
Dave?
Yeah, I'll try to be as nice as I can about it. I'll just say that I don't think that LLMs are at the point where they are extremely useful in critical situations. There are certain areas where they're kind of neat. They can do some basic tasks, and as long as you have somebody who already knows what they're doing to sort of rein them in, they can have some use. The biggest problem that I see with them, at least in the short term, is that they produce a lot of really unmaintainable code that will ultimately cause a lot of problems down the line. One of the things that you gain as a developer and experience over the years, you really come to realize how much maintainability is king. And that's what I was talking about earlier about simplicity. When you're very first getting started in development, that doesn't seem like that big of a deal. You got your code. Hey, it seems to work. Ship it. It's good to go. The problem is that whenever something breaks, somebody has to go in there and fix it. It's like, oh well, I'll just use AI again. But if you look at, or LLMs really, I don't even like to call it AI for what it currently is. But if you look at the way that it generates the code, the context buffer, a little bit technical here, but the idea is the context buffer is not big enough so that it really can't and doesn't consider the most important aspects, which are the negative or the negative paths, the malicious actor front, right? So it's like you can generate code that works and seems to in the positive path where, it gives you the desired result. And then if you look at any project, you're starting to actually see almost every major open source project is now dropping out of all the bug bounty programs because they're just getting nothing but all these LLM generated bug reports that are complete fabrications. They're saying like, oh, well, look, this thing is wrong here. And then whatever it points at isn't even in the code. It doesn't even exist. It's just complete hallucinations. And the problem is that generates a very huge time sink because somebody, a human, has to sit there and look at that and see if this is a valid report. Meanwhile, somebody can generate one of these things, this junk that looks on the surface reasonably correct or accurate because it has the right kind of buzzwords and it seems like it could be right. And so it's a very big denial of service on the very few developers that you actually have looking and working on projects. And when people start submitting pull requests that are full of this junk that doesn't match the style properly or that has obviously exploitable issues, like it takes real time and effort to look at that and review it. And I think for the current time, maybe in the future, I'm sure they're going to keep getting better, and there might be a time when that isn't the case. But currently, it is a very much a net negative and a net drain on anybody who seriously uses it. That's from a developer with a lot of experience. That's my take on it.
I think that my observation is that if you're someone who can't code or is unwilling to put in the time to learn how to code, having an LLM write your code for you is better than not having anything. Right. So it's like if you are, I'm not a developer, you want something, you want to make a little app. Having an app is better than no app for the people who are sort of like low on the skill totem pole. So they can kind of like rise up the skill totem pole a little bit and be like, oh, look at this thing I can do with the AI now that, or with the LLM. Look what I can do with this LLM that I couldn't do before. So in that sense, it's nice because it enables people. But in most cases, that's exactly what you don't want in source code, right? You don't want the junior dev who doesn't know anything to be like, and then like, now what? Now what? Oh, is the senior dev supposed to review that? So I think that it's from the perspective of somebody who's like an amateur or novice, it can be useful. But basically, once you're past there, even if you're a junior dev working on a team, just like Dave points out, maintainability is a massive problem, which is that, okay, you're a junior dev. Okay, you're using, an LLM to generate code. Well, it might satisfy the positive path, but the positive path is always the easiest part. So it's like, these are parts that, people don't think about when they think about code. They think like, oh, code is like laying bricks and I can hire 10 bricklayers and they'll lay the bricks in the wall 10 times as fast. And it's like, no, it's not even close to bricklaying, because bricklaying is like effectively positive path only. It's not like, oh, there's all these negative paths that you need to handle with the brickwork. So I feel like, software development that works, people see positive paths like you click button 1 and it does what you want. You click button 2 and it does what you want. And it's like, well, what if somebody clicks on the wrong button? What if somebody hits, what if somebody closes the window? What if somebody does? There's all these stupid edge cases that you need to work through as a developer and you need to handle. And that's where you spend most of your time doing development work. So it's like you can decide to put an LLM on something and it'll spaghetti launch and give you a positive path code. Now, for a website, that's okay. Like, oh, I'm just putting up a personal web page. Okay, that's not a problem. Like the edge cases on a personal web page aren't that serious. But it's like, okay, now put an app in, and then put an app in, and then once you got the app in, it's like, okay, that's a whole other thing. So,
Excellent. So you at the gym?
That was my brother walked by. You walked by without telling me.
So what was so funny is I was wondering if your background was like a static image or not. Well, I guess it wasn't.
No, it's not.
That was comic moment, man. Jay-Z has just posted just a really important heads up. Students are still banned from Decred. He's doing his hair now.
What's up, Exodus' brother?
Hey, Exodus brother.
He does hold Decred, by the way. He's a holder.
Good man. Get him on. I really like your points, and one thing that I was going to say about this whole situation is it's almost going to create more jobs for high end devs, isn't it? Just the pure work of checking these LMMs work, isn't it? So yeah, it certainly still seems like it's in a nonsense situation.
I've seen that claim that basically there's like a whole it's generating work. They're like senior devs that people want to hire to untangle this LLM garbage, and it's like, you're just gonna have to redo the whole thing from scratch.
It's
I've seen some. Sorry, go.
I was gonna say it's the broken glass scenario, isn't it? Break a whole bunch of glass and give people work.
Yeah, I've actually seen some reports that people have looked into it, and if you look at the number of bugs that have been generated per line of code, it's been pretty stable for the last several decades. In general, it's on average, there's about 1 bug per 10 lines of code. That's pretty standard in the industry. Since the advent of LLMs, that has gone up to over 30. That's the new average. I mean, it's because it just generates a lot of very buggy code that ostensibly works on the surface. But as soon as you try to do anything that out of the ordinary, it falls over very quickly. And you really don't want that in financial software. People that controlling cryptocurrencies, money, and things like that. But as Jake said earlier, and I did too, there are some areas where it just doesn't matter all that much. And you can make yourself, if you want to try to automate a local process, maybe you want it to go click on something or update something or do something every so often, and you pop it in there and it gives you out some code to do it. Hey, it's great for that.
Do we have any questions here? There's one from Kloppus. I've been curious to know why Decred does such a good job of deterring pump and dump mechanics and nasty devs. On the other side, would you consider to go academic on Decred? I'm not really sure, but I think we pretty much answered that with the state of we're not really in, we're not in the matrix of needing to onboard loads of devs to fulfill a scenario. So it's more about if you can do it, turn up and you do, and if you can't, then that's why the barrier to entries are relatively high with the Decred system. Any other questions from go on?
I mean, I feel like going academic. I mean, I feel like we sort of draw on academia when we see fit. When there's a a time and a place that academia can be useful to us. Like say with the Coin Shuffle ++ that we ended up integrating into Stake Shuffle for our mixing. We'll use academic tools when they're there. And I mean, if there were academics who wanted to show up and I don't know, audit code or anything along those lines, that's the kind of stuff we'd be interested in. But in terms of like going academic, we don't really seek people out. It's like I think that open source projects do better when they exist, and then if people want to show up, they show up. That's how you get the good people. As once you start going and hunting for people, you have to deal with quality control, right? It's like, and then you have to like interview people, and then you have to like sort them, and there's this whole like dance that you have to do to kind of like sort out the junk. And so that's something that's like, what is it? Ain't nobody got time for that.
Absolutely. I'm coming to the end of the questions that I want to ask, but I mean, I don't know if you've got any more that you want to feed into that, Exodus. I know you brought up a chart just a minute ago. Did you want me to put that on screen?
No, that was the decks. I was gonna live stream the decks, but no, I don't have anything. We've been at this for about 2 hours now, and I think we've covered basically everything. We've covered, the governance stuff, the privacy, where the chain is headed. So yeah, I think we're all good.
Well, the last one from me then. If we're sitting here again for Decred's 20th anniversaries, what would success look like to you guys?
Still having my hair.
I don't know. I mean, success means different things to different people. Like, I think that in all likelihood, Decred will be relevant 10 years from now because we built it that way. We built it so that it would be something that would run for decades or centuries. And, that's that's all you can really hope for. And I mean, what would success look like? I mean, I'd love to have more. I'd love to have more people understand what we're doing, because I think that what we're doing aligns with a lot of the ethos that's out there, like in terms of self-sovereignty and and privacy and sort of the idea of converting law effectively to code. The idea being, that no one can just come and take your money. No one can come and just, rob you of your privacy. No one can come and take away the sovereignty that you have over Decred or over anything that's sort of like a subunit of it. And I feel like there's a lot of overlap. So to me, success would be, we find more people we align with, and we grow our community and we grow our network. That's what success would look like to me. And like numerically, hey, it'd be great if the exchange rate were higher. But I mean, I tell you what, in 10 years, I think things are going to be crazy between now and 10 years from now in terms of currency. Because I mean, my read is we're going into we're already in the fourth turning, and things are starting to get rocky. Like, I know that there's a lot of people who feel a lot of ways about it, but I can't help but notice mass immigration is a thing everywhere in the West, all across Europe, all across North America, even in Japan, to the point where that is not good for social stability. And I think that, that sort of speaks to fiat instability. So tons of people immigrating, money is losing its value. I think things are going to get real rocky between now and 10 years from now. So 10 years from now, things could look quite a bit different. I think that what would success look like 10 years from now? Fiat currencies taking it on the nose would be my success, not just for Decred, but I think for the domain as a whole. Because it's like, it's just a system to rob people. So they got rid of explicit slavery back in the 1800s and then replaced it with implicit slavery. So instead of a small minority of people being 100% slaves, we're all like 10% slaves to the fiat currency. So, that's kind of what I think success would be, is to see that system kind of implode. That's the future I want to see. So I'll project that a little bit.
I'm not sure that I want to see that, but I certainly think that that's the way it's heading. I think we are, whether we like it or not, on this trail of hyperinflation. Although it's been contained, it will probably come to a head in the early to mid 30s, and that's what these limited supply currencies were meant to kind of hedge against. So it will be, in my opinion, I agree completely. It's going to look like a different world, but we'll wait and see. We'll still be here, so we'll still be streaming every month. Me and Exodus.
Yeah. What is it? Aren't you guys familiar? What is it? Agenda 2030. It's build a better cage.
This is the cage, isn't it? On the TV, yeah.
I'm trapped.
I think me and Exodus, have we been running for this for it must be easily 4 years by now. So every month for the last 4 years, we've been on interviewing you guys and talking Decred, and it's been absolutely great.
4 years. Yep.
Yeah. So just a sign off then. Anything you guys want to add just to kind of finish the show up? If we just go round, maybe start with Exodus and then Jake and then Dave, and then we'll say goodbye to everyone.
Yeah, sure. I think we're in a really good position right now. Obviously, what we've covered here, there is kind of a supply shock thesis. There is the thesis that the miner has been drained. Decred is mostly self-custodied. We have a number of novel developments. Bison wallets, they're working on a mesh. They're working on Monero support. So there are even more things coming, and that's the beauty of Decred, is it just gets better over time. It evolves. We have the treasury for the funding. So I think we're in a really good place right now, and things are looking really good for this year. So that's all I wanted to say.
I'm happy with how things are going. It looks like the markets are improving, price action's improving. Hopefully, Mr. Miner, decides to stop being a jerk and we'll see how that goes. I'm looking forward to the rest of 2026, and the revolution will not be custodied.
Yeah, for me, mainly talking about looking back over the last 10 years, I couldn't be happier as far as everything in that realm. I mean, you take a look at it, we've never had any major hack. We've never had any downtime. We've never had anything go wrong with the chain at all, despite going through 13, I believe it is now, hard forks. The software itself, I mean, I don't know if anybody has run it, but I actually, part of the tests and everything that I do, I have very long running nodes that I just leave them up. I have a node that is all outdated now and everything. It got forked off the network a long time ago, but it literally has been running and hasn't crashed for over 7 years straight now. I mean, so it's like when you take a look at everything from a technical aspect, I'm ecstatic about that, super pleased. And then as far as the future is concerned and everything, again, we talked about the markets. That's probably one of the biggest things just from an adoption standpoint. Unfortunately, as good as the tech is, the price really does matter from an adoption standpoint. I certainly want to see more in the realm of whether it's Bison Relay or not, but actually using the cryptocurrency as we talked about there. I'm looking forward to having more in that realm happen. So overall, definitely proud to be part of the project, and thank you guys for continuing to do these shows. 4 years running straight, that's quite the feat, and takes some determination, especially you've been through some pretty bad market times as well. So said just looking forward to continuing to work with everybody and moving the ball forward.
Absolutely. Well said, Jake. Well said, Dave. Well said, Extras. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much to you guys and everything you do. And thank you to the guys that obviously not here as well. And there are so many people behind the scenes doing dev work and making this a reality and making it awesome. So huge thank you to them as well. And just keep working, keep doing what we're doing, and then we'll see you guys again soon. And hopefully anyone else that wants to come on and talk about what they've been up to, always a pleasure to have you on. Thank you, Jake. Thank you, Dave. And all